How about men with light incontinence? Well, there can be pads, there can be these dribble containers in here. Incidentally, there is a nasty rumour around, I think it was Jan Patterson that set it off, that I modelled for this. And I need to tell you that's not true. I did audition, but I didn't get the job. But we also have mechanical devices. So these are the three options that are available to lightly incontinent men. What can we say about them? Well, let's look at the clamp devices first. There's actually only been one study done by Catherine Moore in Canada a few years ago, 2004. Interestingly, what she found was that a lot of men found this device very, very useful for part of the time. For example, a lot of men might go jogging and would happily use one of these while they went out jogging for an hour and then wouldn't use it the rest of the day. And they might use a pad, perhaps, the rest of the day. So as part of a mix, provided the man has sufficient cognitive function to know what he's doing and what damage might be inflicted if he's not sensible, then actually there is evidence for there being usefulness there as part of a mix. What about the dribble containers? Well, there's absolutely nothing published on these. But nevertheless, and I guess some of you would be able to corroborate this, when you talk with continence advisors, they invariably have a story of some of their patients who have something looking like this, which just works well for them and it's fine. And I think we need to distance ourselves from a kind of a yuck factor that says, because I find this terrible, nobody should possibly even consider using it. I think we need to be a little careful there. And there are folk who manage to make things work for all sorts of reasons that defy any kind of logical analysis that you or I might apply. What about pads? Well, there are essentially four different designs of these. Interestingly, in the UK till quite recently, the disposable pouch in the top left there was the standard item, a sort of a pocket that you fit the penis and possibly the scrotum as well into. They come in different variations. But then more recently came a leaf, which looks kind of like a leaf, a codpiece, I guess. If we were in Elizabethan England, this would be called a codpiece, fitting around the whole of the penis and the scrotum. But some men use disposable inserts that were really designed primarily for women. And we also have washable pants equivalent to those that are used by women as well. So what can we say about those? There is relatively little done here, but there's a study that Mandy and I did a few years ago, from which comes most of the evidence. And rather interestingly, this is an example of the data coming from it. So we got all of these men, I think there were about 100, I should have put that on here, shouldn't I, who used each of these products for a couple of weeks in turn and then filled out questionnaires. And this is their overall response. The interesting thing is that the stock item at the time in the UK, the disposable pouch, came out easily the worst of all four. Disposable leafs were considered rather better, but look at the others. Washable pants was pretty high, but also notice that people either loved them or hated them. Can you see? Just about nobody in the middle. Why would that be? Well, we looked at the data and we discovered that the people that loved them were the light incontinent, i.e. they didn't leak terribly much, and the people that hated them were predominantly those with heavier incontinence. So there we are, horses for courses. And disposable inserts, well, a lot of men found them acceptable, but somehow not very masculine because they're designed for women and look like menstrual pads was an issue for them. So if we look across these four products, what are the factors here? Well, one of the key things is whether or not the penis is retracted. If it is, and you've really got very little to hang things on, well, there are some products that work rather less well than others, would be my summary of the situation. Washables are good news if you are light incontinence. Quite sure what I mean by that, but you understand at the light end of the light range of urinary incontinence, and if you're happy with the concept of washables. But again, it's horses for courses. It's looking for the factors that would tend to nudge you in the direction of what's most likely to work. The analogy that I have here is if I want to buy a camera, and I'm not an expert in photography, but if I go to a big camera shop and there is a very skilled sales assistant there, he will ask me 3 or 4 questions, and within 5 minutes on the counter will be 3 or 4 cameras that will do what I want, even though the shop sells 10,000 of them. And I see this as being like the skilled sales assistant that takes the 10,000 options and pulls it down to something manageable and says, well, here are the pros and cons, give them a try and see what you think. And I think oftentimes that's going to be the best way we can serve people. There's no point in waiting for RCTs in this area. They're not going to happen. It would not be sensible to fund them. If you did a big RCT on the products, by the time your results were in print, you couldn't buy the products anymore. So why would you want to do that? It doesn't make sense. We have to take another approach. What about heavy incontinence? Well, if we look at women, pads and catheters, I'm not going to talk about catheters, but I just wanted you to see them on the picture here. And if we look at men also, then we can add 3 more options on there. Sheaths or urodomes, I think you call them down under here, body-worn urinals, mechanical devices. So we've got this range of products available for men also. So let's look at these product categories. We start out looking at the pads. There are 5 options, really, simplistically, in terms of designs. There's the disposable insert of the variety that you wear with close-fitting underwear. That's in the top left. We have pull-ups, which generally have a lot of lycra elastication, so they resemble ordinary underwear in a sense. We have disposable diapers, all-in-ones, briefs. There's a variety of names that they're called. Then there's a variant on that theme where you have a belt, a belted product or T-shaped product. They're called different things in different markets. And there are also washable products. So these are the 5 categories available just now. What can we say about them? Well, there's quite a few studies published here, but almost all of them relating to products you can't buy anymore. So once again, we have to take the generic. Because although most of these products are not available anymore, they are insert pads, or they are diapers, or they are pull-ups, and you can still buy those generic designs. So what can we tell from published data that would help us to make sense of what you can buy at the moment? Well, the most recent study involving looking at those 5 product groupings with 2 large cohorts, again, was that Mandy Fader and I did just a few years ago. And this is what we found. There were two arms to this study. In the first, we looked at their use in nursing homes, and in the second, among community-dwelling, heavily incontinent people. And in the case of nursing homes, we're primarily talking with the caregivers rather than the patients themselves, who are usually unable to talk to us for themselves. What did they have to say? Well, again, holding urine without leaking is well up the pile, but interestingly, keeping the skin dry and being comfortable were issues raised by caregivers as important, and 1 or 2 other things easy to put on, containing smell. Perhaps you won't find very surprising. So what about these products then? Well, it's very interesting that one thing that we found was that whether the person was able to stand unaided or not was a crucial factor. If they were able to stand, the likelihood was that a pant-style product, that's to say the insert with the close-fitting underwear, or the pull-up, the likelihood was that that would be a better solution. On the other hand, if they weren't able to stand, they were slightly in favour of the diaper-style product. It's rather easier to put one of those on somebody who is laying in a bed, for example. Whereas if you want to put a diaper on somebody who can't stand on their own, you need somewhere between 25 and 26 nurses to help, to hold all the various bits of body and product in the right place at the right time. It's really what it comes out at. That's my simplistic take, but you get the picture. What about men and women in the community? What did they have to say? Well, very interestingly, if we had time, I could take you back to the slide I showed you like this for lightly incontinent women, and it's almost identical. It's quite interesting. So the priorities of the heavily incontinent people in the community are very, very similar to those of lightly incontinent women in the community. Maybe we shouldn't be surprised by that. And what did we find for them? Well, one very, very interesting thing, so these are folk who are answering for themselves now. We looked at those 5 product designs to see which was their primary preference, which was the one that they would go for day and night, men and women. Look at the men. So the bright turquoise is their first choice and the paler colour is their second choice. So you can see all-in-ones during the day for men. Interestingly, washables at night, terry toweling washables. Now, this is a predominantly lady audience, and usually when I say this, a woman from the back shouts, "Who was doing the washing?" I don't know the answer to that, but I guess we can all guess. But nevertheless, for men, and we've found this in other studies too, so it's not just an outlier. Now, here's the interesting thing. Same question to women, completely different. So isn't that interesting? Men and women are different in their preferences. And we need to acknowledge that rather than one size fits all and fits both sexes. So really quite different. So if we summarize that quickly into what we can say across these products, a lot of detailed information here about what will tend to work or tend not to work for the different groups of people. And we'll not look at the detail there because of the time. What about sheaths and bags? Well, these pictures actually were put together by Jan Patterson because she was in the ICI4 and took charge of this particular section. A great variety of products. What can we say about them? Well, there's a certain number of studies, not a great number, but there are some there from which we can glean some principles, and these are the key things that come up again and again. So security, staying in place, freedom from leakage is number one, right up the top. Comfort is an issue, ease of application and removal. These come out of the studies that I'm just mentioning now, and in particular this one by Nichols and Bayliss. So if we look at the which will favour and discourage use, this is what we get. Very interestingly, we found that quite a lot of men will, for example, use a sheath during the day and a pad at night, because then you're allowing the different areas of skin to rest. They're not constantly being challenged by the product, which is an interesting one. So mix and match has a place there also. And there are a number of other factors just summarised at the bottom of the slide here with regard to other things that we can say. So these products have a place also. Good dexterity is vital. Local skin breakdown is an issue. And certainly if there's local skin breakdown, that would be a factor against starting on sheaths. Urine drainage bags, there is a limited amount of literature on those also. And what there is tend to come down to paying attention to taps and straps. With taps, you've really got this issue. If it's big and chunky, you can operate it if you have not very good manual dexterity. But on the other hand, you'll probably be able to see it under your clothes. You can have it small and discreet, provided you have manual dexterity, good eyesight, and so on. And there's a tension there. It's a question of optimizing it wherever for particular people. Straps, some people get on very well with latex straps, others like fabric and so on. It really is personal choice. And the issue here is to give people the space to experiment with the options. Body-worn urinals, there is absolutely nothing there, but actually we're currently running a study that Mandy Fader is leading where we're actually taking a group of post-prostatectomy men and who primarily have been pad users and giving them the option to try body-worn urinals, to try sheaths, and also to try mechanical devices, and just to see what kind of mix works for who and find out what the factors are. So this space should be filled fairly soon by the first study that's looked specifically at them. But they generally look like medieval torture kits, I think, to most folk. But nevertheless, there are some people for whom they make life-changing difference. And then just to close, something I wanted to say, that when we pulled this ICI4 together, and it was, we felt very useful to gather all this evidence in one place, we felt that actually some of the people who could benefit the most from this would be the incontinent people themselves, and they weren't going to get a hold of this great tome of a book. So we began to look at how can we get this information more widely available. And we have just recently agreed with the ICS that there will be web pages from the main ICS website which gather this information together, present it in a patient-friendly way, and help people to look at the generic evidence and arrive at the product category that's most likely to suit them. And then there will be connections from this site to the various national sites, and I hope that the CFA will be one of those, for getting local information. Because, of course, what we can't do in this central website is to explain, so how do you get healthcare in Australia? Who pays for it? Which specific companies are delivering which specific products here? We can't do that internationally, but we can address the generic issues and point people in the direction of the national local knowledge. And that's what this website's going to do, and it will be launched very early next year. So watch this space. And so really, I've tried to cover quite a lot of territory quite quickly. Reassured that you will be able to look at the detail on the CFA website later if you want to pick up on some of that. And I would be very, very happy to discuss any of this with anybody who wants to ply me with a cup of coffee in one of the breaks over the next 2 days. Thank you so much for inviting me.
The very good news, you'll get to experiment with his own Australian urinal. Thank you very much.